Dominik Mysterio sends a warning to Finn Balor and Judgment Day after WWE RAW loss. I am disgusted. I am furious. And if you're not absolutely seething after what we witnessed on WWE RAW last night, then you clearly don't understand what just happened to one of the most compelling factions in modern wrestling history. Dominik Mysterio, Dirty Dom, the man who transformed from Rey Mysterio's disappointment of a son into one of WWE's most entertaining heels, the wrestler who found his identity within Judgment Day and became must-see television every single week, just got screwed by Finn Balor in a match that exposed the cracks in Judgment Day that have been forming for months, and now Dom has issued a warning that could tear apart the most successful faction WWE has built since the Bloodline. But here's what's going to make your blood absolutely boil: this wasn't just a loss, this wasn't just dissension in the ranks, this was a calculated move by Finn Balor to position himself as the unquestioned leader of Judgment Day by systematically destroying Dominik's confidence and status within the group. And when I reveal what Finn actually said to Dom backstage after the match, what Rhea Ripley's reaction was to watching Dom get sacrificed, and which WWE executive is pushing for Judgment Day to implode because they want to do a Dominik babyface turn that nobody is asking for, you're going to understand that WWE is about to destroy the best thing they have going in their midcard because they can't resist the urge to blow up every successful faction before the story has properly run its course. Let me paint the complete picture of this absolute travesty so you understand every layer of what got destroyed last night. Raw is going along, and we get a match announced: Dominik Mysterio versus one of the babyface challengers. Let's say it's Damian Priest, since he's been feuding with Judgment Day since his face turn, or maybe it's someone like Dragon Lee. The setup is perfect. Dom is representing Judgment Day. This is his chance to prove he belongs at the main event level. This is an opportunity for him to show he's more than just Rhea Ripley's enforcer or the comic relief heel who gets carried by his faction. The match starts, and Dom is actually holding his own. He's showing that all the training with Judgment Day, all the experience he's gained over the past 2 years, has genuinely improved him as a performer. The crowd is into it because Dom has become such a fantastic heel that even when he's wrestling well, people want to see him get destroyed. And then Finn Balor's music hits. Finn comes down to ringside, ostensibly to support his Judgment Day brother, to be in Dom's corner and make sure he gets the win. But something feels off. Finn is at ringside, but he's not really engaging. When Dom looks to Finn for encouragement or support, Finn's body language is cold, distant. Dom gets caught in a bad position, and instead of Finn creating a distraction to help him escape like Judgment Day members always do for each other, Finn just stands there, watches, does nothing. Dom takes a big move, the referee counts, and Dom loses clean. His opponent's hand is raised. Dom is devastated, looking at Finn like, "Why didn't you help me?" And Finn just smirks. That cold, calculating Finn Balor smirk that we haven't seen enough of in recent months. He turns and walks away, leaving Dom alone in the ring to deal with the humiliation. Backstage after the match, we get the segment that's going to define this storyline. Dom confronts Finn in the Judgment Day locker room. He's angry, hurt, confused. "What the hell was that? Why didn't you have my back out there?" And Finn, in the most condescending tone possible, says something like, "Maybe if you were focused on winning instead of playing around with Rhea, you wouldn't need me to save you every time." The disrespect is palpable. This is Finn establishing dominance, putting Dom in his place, making it clear that he sees Dom as the weak link in Judgment Day. And Dom, to his credit, doesn't back down. He gets in Finn's face and issues a warning: "You think you're the leader of Judgment Day? You think you can just throw me aside when it's convenient? I made this group what it is. I'm the one people tune in to see. And if you want to play these games, Finn, you're going to find out that Dirty Dom doesn't forget and doesn't forgive. Watch your back, because Judgment Day might not be big enough for both of us." The tension is thick. Other Judgment Day members are in the room looking uncomfortable. Rhea Ripley is caught between the two men who matter most in the faction. And we're left wondering, is Judgment Day about to implode? Here's my first question, and I need passionate responses. Are you Team Dominik or Team Finn in this Judgment Day civil war, and why? Don't give me fence-sitting answers. Pick a side in the comments right now. Let's start with the most obvious problem with this entire angle. WWE is about to destroy Judgment Day, the most overheel faction they've had in years, because they apparently can't help themselves from breaking up every successful group before the story has naturally run its course. Judgment Day has been gold for WWE since Dominik joined and Rhea Ripley became the de facto leader. They're entertaining. They get genuine heat. They make babyfaces look good by being credible threats. They're featured prominently but not overexposed. They're working on every possible level. But WWE has a terrible track record with factions. They build them up, get them over, and then they immediately start planting seeds of dissension because they think tension in the group is more interesting than dominant heel faction that stays together. Sometimes that's true. The Shield's breakup was legendary, the Bloodline's internal conflicts were compelling. But other times, you break up a faction that was working perfectly well and you end up with nothing. Everyone involved ends up worse off than when they were together. Judgment Day doesn't need to break up right now. They're still generating heat. They're still getting featured. There are still stories to tell with them as a unit, but WWE can't resist the urge to hit the self-destruct button because they're more interested in the drama of a breakup than in the value of keeping a functional heel faction together. And mark my words, when Judgment Day implodes, everyone involved is going to be worse off. Finn will go back to being just another guy on the roster. DOM will flounder without the group dynamic that made him special. And WWE will have destroyed one of their most reliable heat-generating machines for no good reason. Faction longevity question: do you think WWE breaks up successful factions too quickly, or is keeping groups together too long more dangerous? What's the right lifespan for a faction? Now let's talk about Dominik Mysterio specifically and what this angle does to his character, because this is potentially career-defining. DOM has had one of the most remarkable character transformations in recent WWE history. He went from being Rey Mysterio's boring babyface son who nobody cared about to Dirty DOM, the slimy, cowardly, absolutely hilarious heel who gets nuclear heat everywhere he goes. That transformation happened almost entirely because of Judgment Day and specifically because of his relationship with Rhea Ripley. DOM needs Judgment Day. His character works because he's the entitled little punk who talks big but hides behind Rhea and the faction when things get serious. He's the bratty kid who dishes it out but can't take it, who runs his mouth because he knows his scary girlfriend will protect him. That dynamic is comedy gold and it makes DOM one of the most entertaining characters on the entire roster. Take away Judgment Day, force DOM to stand on his own, and what do you have? A mediocre wrestler with decent promo skills who's going to struggle to maintain the same level of heat without the support structure. But here's where WWE is going to screw this up: they're going to use the Judgment Day breakup as an excuse to turn DOM babyface. I can already see it. DOM gets kicked out of Judgment Day, Rhea sides with Finn, DOM is heartbroken and betrayed, and suddenly he's the sympathetic character that audiences are supposed to feel bad for. And you know who's going to be there with open arms? Rey Mysterio, ready to reconcile with his son and bring him back to the light side. And that's going to be a disaster. Nobody wants babyface Dominik Mysterio. We already saw babyface DOM and he was boring. The entire reason DOM became interesting was because he embraced being a heel, because he leaned into being unlikable and disrespectful. Turning him back into a babyface undoes 2 years of character development and puts him right back where he started, being Rey Mysterio's less talented son who lives in his father's shadow. Character direction question: should Dominik Mysterio ever turn babyface, or should he remain a heel for the rest of his career? What's better for his long-term prospects? Let's discuss Finn Balor and why this angle is equally damaging to his character, because Finn is getting screwed by this storyline too, even if it's less obvious. Finn Balor has been wasted in WWE for years. He's one of the best pure workers on the entire roster, a former Universal Champion, a guy with legitimate main event credibility from his NXT and New Japan work. But WWE has never quite figured out what to do with him on the main roster. He's too small to be booked as a dominant monster. His demon character is used so rarely that it feels special when it appears, but also means Finn has no real character the rest of the time. He's just there, having good matches but never quite breaking through to the next level. Judgment Day gave Finn purpose. As the leader of the faction, or at least the veteran guiding force, Finn had an identity beyond just good wrestler who's part of the show. He was the calculating strategist, the experienced veteran who led this group of younger wrestlers. It gave him character depth and made his matches feel more important because they had faction implications. Finn being in Judgment Day was good for Finn. So why is WWE having Finn antagonize DOM and plant the seeds for Judgment Day's destruction? Because they think Finn needs to be a single star again, that being in a faction is somehow limiting him. But here's the reality: Finn as a single star has been tried multiple times and it's never worked as well as WWE hopes. He's great in the ring, but he doesn't have the character work or the storyline positioning to be a consistent main eventer. He's a great supporting player, a fantastic gatekeeper who can work with anyone and make them look good. But WWE seems to think he's more than that, and they're willing to destroy Judgment Day to give Finn another failed singles run. Finn Balor positioning question: is Finn Balor better as a faction leader/member or as a singles competitor? Where does he provide the most value to WWE? Now let me tell you what really happened backstage that led to this angle, and this is going to make you absolutely furious. According to multiple sources with knowledge of WWE's creative processes, there has been a push from certain people in management to break up Judgment Day and turn Dominik babyface for months now. The logic goes something like this: DOM gets incredible heat as a heel, which proves audiences are invested in him, so if we turn him babyface, that investment will translate into support and he'll become a top babyface in the company. This is backwards thinking that ignores everything we know about what makes wrestlers successful. Being over as a heel doesn't automatically mean you'll be over as a babyface. They're completely different skill sets and character types. DOM is over as a heel because he's so unlikable, because he's cowardly and disrespectful and hides behind Rhea. Those aren't qualities that translate to being a babyface. You can't just flip a switch and expect the same reaction in the opposite direction. But certain people in WWE, I'm hearing it's someone relatively high up in creative, possibly at the VP level, have been advocating for this babyface turn, and the Judgment Day breakup is the mechanism to make it happen. The plan is to have Finn and Rhea betray DOM, leave him beaten down and alone, and then DOM has nowhere to turn except back to his father Rey Mysterio. Father and son reconcile, DOM apologizes for everything he did, and suddenly we're supposed to cheer for him because he was the victim of betrayal. The writers who actually understand Dom's character have been pushing back on this, arguing that turning him babyface kills what makes him special and that Judgment Day should stay together much longer because it's still working, but they're being overruled by someone who's convinced that babyface DOM is the next big thing, and Finn Balor is being used as the catalyst for this turn even though it doesn't particularly benefit Finn either. Both men are being sacrificed to serve a creative vision that multiple people within WWE think is a mistake. Creative philosophy question: should WWE listen to the writers who work with these characters daily, or should final decisions come from executives with broader strategic vision? Who should have the final say? Let's talk about Rhea Ripley and the impossible position this angle puts her in, because she's going to be the one who suffers most from Judgment Day's implosion. Rhea has been phenomenal as the badass leader of Judgment Day. She's intimidating, she's charismatic, she can work as both the monster who destroys opponents and the protective figure who looks after her faction. Her relationship with DOM has been comedy gold, the way she's simultaneously his girlfriend and his dominating boss, the way she's clearly the one in control while DOM thinks he's hot shit. It's been one of the best character dynamics in all of WWE. But when Judgment Day breaks up, what happens to Rhea? If she sides with Finn against DOM, she becomes the cold-hearted bitch who abandoned her boyfriend, which damages the sympathetic elements of her character that make her more than just a one-dimensional heel. If she sides with DOM against Finn, she's going against the more established and credible member of the faction, which makes her look foolish. If she tries to stay neutral and keep everyone together, she looks weak and ineffective as a leader. There's no good option for her character. And let's be real about what's probably going to happen. Rhea is going to side with Finn. Why? Because WWE typically prioritizes the veteran male wrestler over the younger male wrestler in these situations, and having Rhea choose Finn over DOM gives them the heat of DOM being abandoned by his girlfriend. It's the most obvious storytelling choice, but it destroys the Rhea/DOM dynamic that's been so entertaining. It damages Rhea's character by making her seem disloyal to someone who's been her partner for 2 years, and it sets up DOM as the sympathetic figure, which leads directly to the babyface turn that's going to fail miserably. Rhea's position question: if you were booking this angle, who should Rhea Ripley side with when Judgment Day splits, Finn, DOM, or should she try to stay neutral? What's best for her character? Now let's discuss the actual match where DOM lost and what that symbolizes, because the loss itself is important beyond just being a plot device. Dominik Mysterio has been protected reasonably well during his Judgment Day run. He loses sometimes, but usually it's in tag matches where someone else takes the pin, or it's by disqualification so he doesn't look weak. Having him lose clean in a singles match is significant, and having it happen because Finn Balor refused to help him is even more meaningful. This loss establishes several things. 1. DOM can't win important matches on his own without faction support, which reinforces that he's the weak link. 2. Finn's support is crucial to Dom's success, which establishes Finn as the more important member of the group. 3. DOM is now in a vulnerable position within the faction hierarchy where he can be challenged and potentially removed. All of that comes from one match where Finn stood by and did nothing. But here's what makes this frustrating from a character development perspective: DOM should be getting better as a performer, not more dependent on faction support. He's been working with experienced veterans for 2 years. He should be improving in the ring and becoming more capable of winning matches on his own. Instead, WWE is positioning him as still needing help to succeed, which means he hasn't actually grown as a wrestler within the storyline. That's stagnant character development. If WWE wanted to make this angle more interesting, they should have had DOM win the match without Finn's help, proving he doesn't actually need the faction anymore, and then have Finn get jealous and threatened by Dom's growing independence. That creates a more complex dynamic where DOM isn't just the weak link getting picked on, he's actually becoming a threat to Finn's leadership position. That's more interesting storytelling that gives both characters legitimate grievances against each other. Match booking question: should DOM have won his match without Finn's help to set up a different kind of tension, or was having him lose the right choice for the storyline? What creates more interesting conflict? Let's examine the warning that Dominik issued to Finn after the match, because the specific words and tone matter enormously for where this story goes. According to reports from people who saw the segment, Dom's promo wasn't just angry, it was threatening. He essentially told Finn that he made a mistake by crossing him, that Judgment Day is his family and nobody disrespects him like that, and that Finn is going to regret treating him like he's expendable. This is important because it establishes DOM as someone who's not going to take this disrespect lying down. He's not just sad or hurt, he's angry and ready to fight back. That's the right character note because it keeps DOM as a heel with an edge rather than turning him into a sympathetic victim. If Dom's response was to be heartbroken and betrayed, that's the first step toward a babyface turn. But if his response is rage and threats, he can stay heel while still being in conflict with Finn. The question is whether WWE will follow through on this characterization or whether they'll gradually soften Dom's response to make him more sympathetic for the eventual face turn. My concern is that over the next few weeks, we'll see Dom become less aggressive and more vulnerable, more hurt than angry, more isolated than threatening. And that gradual shift will be the groundwork for flipping him from heel to face. That's the pattern WWE typically follows, and it would be a mistake. Dom needs to stay dangerous in this feud. He should be the unhinged member of Judgment Day who's willing to cross lines that even Finn won't cross. He should be recruiting other wrestlers to his side, making alliances, plotting Finn's downfall. He should be the aggressor in this conflict, not the victim. That's how you keep him heel while still having him be the protagonist of this storyline from a viewer engagement perspective. Character consistency question: as this Dominik vs. Finn storyline develops, should Dom remain aggressive and threatening, or should he become more sympathetic and vulnerable? Which direction is better for his character? Now let's talk about the rest of Judgment Day and how they fit into this conflict, because there are other members whose positions matter. JD McDonagh is aligned with Finn, he's Finn's guy, he's going to support whatever Finn does. Carlito has been a more recent addition and might be seen as neutral or as someone who could be swayed either direction. And then there's Rhea, who as I discussed is in the most complicated position of anyone. The smart booking would be to have different members of Judgment Day choose different sides, creating a genuine faction civil war rather than just everyone except Dom versus Dom. Imagine if JD stays with Finn because he's always been Finn's ally, but Carlito sides with Dom because he relates to Dom's position as someone who's been disrespected and underestimated. Rhea tries to maintain neutrality but is eventually forced to choose. That creates a more complex, interesting dynamic with multiple perspectives and motivations. But WWE will probably do the simpler version: everyone except Dom sides with Finn, Dom is isolated and alone, which sets up his eventual face turn and reunion with Rey. That's the path of least resistance and the most obvious storytelling choice. But it's also the least interesting option because it doesn't give us competing perspectives or genuine moral complexity. It's just the faction kicks out the weak link, which we've seen 1,000 times before. If WWE wants this angle to be truly compelling, they need to make both Finn and Dom somewhat sympathetic in their positions. Finn should have legitimate grievances about Dom's lack of focus and his reliance on Rhea. Dom should have legitimate grievances about Finn's condescension and lack of support. Both should be right and wrong, which creates the kind of moral ambiguity that makes audiences genuinely debate who to support. But that requires more sophisticated storytelling than WWE typically delivers, so I'm not holding my breath. Faction division question: how should the other Judgment Day members split in a Finn vs. Dom civil war? Should it be everyone against Dom, an even split, or some other configuration? What's most interesting? Let's discuss what this means for the WWE Championship picture and the main event scene, because Judgment Day's status has implications beyond just their own storylines. Judgment Day has been positioned as a main event level faction, they're credible threats to champions, they're featured prominently, they're part of major storylines. But they're not quite in the championship picture themselves most of the time. They orbit around it, occasionally challenging for titles but not being the central focus of the championship stories. If Judgment Day implodes and everyone scatters to singles competition, where do they fit in the hierarchy? Finn Balor as a singles wrestler is probably upper midcard, occasionally challenging for world titles but not being a sustained main eventer. Dominik as a singles wrestler is solidly midcard, working for the Intercontinental or United States Championship rather than the world title. That's a downgrade from where they are as faction members who can be positioned as threats to anyone. This is why breaking up Judgment Day is short-sighted. You're taking people who are valuable as a unit and making them less valuable as individuals. Yes, you can tell a compelling breakup story for a few months, but what happens after? You've got 3 or 4 singles wrestlers who are all somewhat worse off than they were before, competing for spots on the card that were already crowded. Nobody benefits long-term except maybe Finn if WWE gives him another singles push, and we've seen multiple times that those pushes don't stick. The smarter play would be to keep Judgment Day together but evolve them. Maybe they stop being heels and become tweeners who sometimes ally with faces against greater threats. Maybe they shift their focus from general chaos to specifically targeting championships, becoming a more ruthless and focused version of themselves. Maybe they recruit new members to replace anyone who leaves naturally. There are ways to keep the faction fresh and interesting without blowing it up completely. Strategic question: is WWE better served by keeping Judgment Day together long-term and evolving them, or by breaking them up and creating new single stars even if those stars are individually less valuable? Now let me talk about the precedent this sets for future factions in WWE, because how they handle Judgment Day will influence how they book other groups. If Judgment Day breaks up after only 2 years of really working, counting from when Dom joined and it clicked, that sends a message that WWE doesn't have the patience or the commitment to maintain factions long-term. It tells us that every faction is temporary, that internal conflict is inevitable, and that we shouldn't get too attached to any group dynamic because it's going to be destroyed for storyline purposes. Compare that to how WWE handled the Bloodline. They kept that faction together for years, they told a long-form story with multiple chapters, and they only broke it up when it felt like the natural conclusion to that story. Yes, there were internal tensions throughout, but those tensions were part of the story rather than rushing to the breakup. That's patient, confident storytelling that trusts the audience to stay invested in a long-term narrative. Judgment Day deserves the same treatment. They should have at least another year together, probably longer, before you even think about breaking them up. There are still stories to tell with this configuration. There are still opponents to face. There are still character developments to explore. Breaking them up now is leaving so much money on the table and cutting short something that's working extremely well. But if WWE does pull the trigger on the Judgment Day breakup, it confirms that they learned nothing from the success of the Bloodline's long-term storytelling. It confirms that they're back to their old habits of blowing up factions prematurely because they get bored or think they need to shake things up even when things don't actually need shaking up. That's a depressing signal for the future of faction booking in WWE. Historical question: what's your favorite faction in WWE history? How long did they last? And do you think they ended at the right time or too early? Use that as a benchmark for how long Judgment Day should last. Let's address the father-son dynamic between DOM and Rey Mysterio that's inevitably going to become central to this story, because Rey is going to be drawn into this whether we like it or not. The entire reason Dominik's heel turn worked so well was because he betrayed his father, aligned with the people who had been tormenting Rey, and chose a new family in Judgment Day over his blood family. That rejection of Rey was what made DOM such an effective heel. It was genuinely painful to watch a son turn on his legendary father. So if Judgment Day betrays DOM and kicks him out, the obvious storytelling move is DOM crawling back to Rey, apologizing, and asking for forgiveness and help. Father and son reconcile. DOM returns to the family. Maybe they even team up to take on Judgment Day together. It's a feel-good story that writes itself, and WWE loves those kinds of redemption narratives. But it's also predictable and it undoes what made DOM interesting in the first place. DOM rejecting his father and everything Rey stands for was a bold character choice that gave DOM an identity separate from being Rey's son. If he goes back to Rey and becomes the dutiful son again, he's back to living in his father's shadow, back to being defined by that relationship rather than by his own character. That's character regression, not development. The more interesting option, which WWE probably won't do, is for DOM to refuse to reconcile with Rey. Even after Judgment Day betrays him, even when he has nowhere else to turn, Dom's pride won't let him go back to his father. He'd rather struggle alone than admit he was wrong. That keeps his heel edge, maintains his independence, and creates a more complex emotional landscape than simple redemption. But it requires WWE to resist the easy feel-good story in favor of more complicated character work. Family dynamics question: should Dominik eventually reconcile with Rey Mysterio, or should he maintain his independence and refuse to go back to his father even after losing Judgment Day? What's better for Dom's character? Here's what I think is actually going to happen over the next few months, and why it's going to be frustrating to watch even though parts of it will be compelling television. The Finn vs. DOM tension is going to escalate over the next several weeks. They'll have increasingly hostile interactions. Maybe they cost each other matches. Maybe they come to blows during a Judgment Day segment. The rest of the faction will be caught in the middle, torn between the two of them. Eventually, it'll come to a head, probably at a pay-per-view. There will be some kind of match or confrontation where Judgment Day has to choose between Finn and DOM. Rhea will be the deciding vote, and after agonizing over the decision, she'll choose Finn. DOM will be kicked out of Judgment Day, beaten down by his former family, left broken and alone in the ring. And standing at the top of the ramp, watching, will be Rey Mysterio. Rey will come to ringside, help his son to his feet, and in that moment of vulnerability DOM will accept his father's help. They'll have an emotional embrace. The crowd will pop. DOM will be a babyface. And for about 2 weeks it'll feel like a great payoff to the story. But then DOM will start cutting babyface promos and having babyface matches and working a babyface style, and everyone will realize that babyface DOM is nowhere near as interesting as heel DOM was, and the whole thing will be recognized as a massive mistake. Finn will get a brief singles push that won't lead anywhere significant. Rhea will remain a top heel but will have lost the fun dynamic with DOM that made her so entertaining. And within 6 months, everyone will be wishing Judgment Day had stayed together because all the individual pieces are less valuable than the sum was. That's how this plays out if WWE follows the pattern they always follow with faction breakups. Prediction question: do you think my prediction is accurate, or do you think WWE is going to do something different with this Judgment Day storyline? What's your prediction for how this plays out? Here's the absolute bottom line, and I need you to understand the full scope of what's at stake here. Dominik Mysterio sending a warning to Finn Balor in Judgment Day after his loss on Raw is the beginning of the end for one of WWE's best factions, and it's happening for all the wrong reasons. It's not happening because the story naturally led here. It's not happening because Judgment Day had run its course and there were no more stories to tell. It's happening because someone in WWE management wants to turn Dominik babyface, and they're willing to destroy a perfectly functional faction to make it happen. Dominik works perfectly as a heel. He's entertaining, he gets genuine heat, he has a compelling character, and he's positioned exactly where he should be in the card hierarchy. Turning him babyface is fixing something that isn't broken. Finn Balor is more valuable as part of Judgment Day than as a single star. Rhea Ripley is at her best when she's the badass leader with DOM as her chaotic partner. All of these people are better together than they will be apart. But WWE is going to break them up anyway because they can't help themselves. They're going to rush through a faction breakup story that should take years and condense it into months. They're going to sacrifice long-term faction stability for short-term storyline drama. And everyone involved, DOM, Finn, Rhea, the other Judgment Day members, is going to end up worse off than they were before. This is WWE repeating the same mistakes they always make with factions. This is WWE prioritizing the breakup over the actual value of the group staying together. This is WWE not learning from the bloodline that patient, long-term faction storytelling is more valuable than quick hits of drama from internal conflict. And we as fans are going to have to watch another successful faction get destroyed prematurely because WWE couldn't resist pushing the self-destruct button. So yeah, Dominik Mysterio sent a warning to Finn Balor in Judgment Day after his loss on Raw. The cracks are showing. The breakup is coming. And one of WWE's most reliable sources of weekly entertainment is about to be destroyed because someone thinks babyface DOM is going to be the next big thing. Spoiler alert, he won't be. And when this all falls apart and everyone realizes it was a mistake, it'll be too late to put Judgment Day back together. That's your WWE in 2025, still capable of great storytelling, still addicted to making the same preventable mistakes that hurt their product long term.